Welcome back to New World Tank Mastery's weekly mutation breakdown. I'm Ty James, your mother's favorite online video game tank. I know, it is what it is. And today I'm going to be talking about what the expeditions are this week that are mutated, what the mutation is, kind of how to deal with it, and then what you can expect to drop from those mutations. So, before we get into that though, last night around 11 p.m. Pacific time, they did drop a patch, patching out the base perk crafted and the defensive charm slot or offensive charm slot or skill charm slot that was a matching double perk. So for example, if you had a crafted piece of Enchanted Ward and then you had Enchanted Ward 2, the defensive charm, your item was reset. And how they reset it is they took the base perk, the base Enchanted Ward, the better one, and they replaced that with like a defensive charm slot. So if you had an item like that, if you log in and you look at your item, it'll be reset. It'll have an empty charm slot. And then you should have retained your Enchanted Ward 2 charm. So hopefully you didn't lose everything and all that money you spent into Enchanted Ward 2 isn't wasted. But it's yet to be determined. Same thing for like the Warhammer. If you had a Warhammer that was crafted that had like say Sundering Shockwave and then you had a Sundering Shockwave charm, then the base Sundering Shockwave, not the charm one, will be reset and now be a either offensive or skill charm slot instead. So your item was reset. We'll see how they did with the triple attunements. So far, it looks like the triple attunements are still there. We'll do some testing to see if they did do a diminishing return on the damage output. But as far as we know, triple attunement is still a thing on weapons. So just a heads up. Okay. All right, let's get into this week's mutations. We're going to go to activities here, click on Mutated Expeditions, and it's going to give you your list. This week is Garden of Genesis, the Ennead, and Glacial Tarn. Garden of Genesis is a one to farm if you're trying to get the Freya's Francisca Hatchet artifact. It's like a throwing artifact for reducing cooldowns on your throwing skills with the hatchet. Mutated Glacial Tarn is going to give you the Deep Freeze artifact. It's a fire staff that's kind of like ice oriented. And it just helps with like chilling and things longer on enemies, okay? The other thing about Mutated Glacial Tarn is Mutated Glacial Tarn still drops the Frigid Dawn set for tanking. And I'll show you guys kind of how you would utilize that in Season 10. And then for the Ennead also drops a shield artifact called the Wall. And honestly, I've been kind of leaning away from the Void Dark Plate that comes from Barnacles and Black Powder because the amount of stamina damage you take with that piece of artifact gear on versus how much extra armor you get, it's kind of a, it's kind of a weird trade-off that is kind of making Void Dark Plate not as important as a tank as far as an artifact. So having something like the Wall, which definitely helps with shielding and blocking and stamina, kind of might be a better option, especially with some of these new, perks combinations and things like that you can get from chess pieces that we've been kind of playing with. So be good to farm the Ennead. Make sure you get the Wall so you can get that fully upgraded and all the quests done, and then you have just another piece of gear that you can put in your arsenal as a tank. Okay, so let's talk about the type of mutation this week. It's going to be Void. The mutation is called Eternal. So creeping on death, enemies cast a spell granting other enemies in the area void and power. So they're just going to basically, on death, they increase the damage of the other enemies nearby by 50%. Abyssal enemies deal 50% of all their damage as void damage. Paranoid enemies applying building stacks of paranoia when hit. At 4 out of 4 stacks, it causes a void burst to appear at your location. It deals 40 to 70% base void damage in a small area. And then Oblivion enemies apply leech on hit, dealing 20-30% base void damage and healing the enemy for 90 to 120 damage dealt over time. So basically, they're going to get a leeching effect when they hit you, and they're going to gain deal extra damage while leeching health back. Okay. The types of items that are going to drop is like your Abyssal Attunement. So if you're looking to get some extra void damage on a weapon, it'd be good to farm any of these mutations this week. And same thing with Abyssal Conditioning. If you're trying to get void damage conditioning and absorption, then that's what's going to be dropping from a lot of the, quote unquote trash loot. If you do an M2 version, it's going to have Savage. So M1 is just going to have the basic Eternal. M2 is going to have Savage. Savage is going to have this from the M1 version, and then additionally Festering. Enemies are going to apply a stack of disease on hit, reducing your income and healing by 2.5 to 5% per stack. You can help mitigate this with your gear, okay? And I'll kind of go over that when we talk about how to deal with this mutation. They also have Slicer, so they cast slicing beams that kind of spin around, and they'll do 30% base void damage when you get touched by them, okay? And these tend to stay lingering even after you've killed the mob, just you know, heads up. If you do the M3 version, you're still going to have the original mutation Eternal. It's just going to be scaling and damage. You're still going to have Savage, and then on top of it, you're going to have Censored Curse. So as a player, you're going to have the following debuffs on you. Blowback Void. So as you use ability, it's going to deplete a global affliction. When that affliction is depleted, a zone is casted on all players, which silences all players in the area. After it expires, it then detonates, dealing 65% max health. Max health. 65% max health void damage to players in the radius. That's a lot, especially as a tank. That's quite a bit of HP loss in a burst. So you're going to want to make sure you're not in that zone when it depletes. Now, Truncated is while you're in the silent zones and while those are active, you're going to lose your natural mana regen. But if you stand in the silent zone, it does grant you 25 mana per 3/4 of a second. So you can utilize it to get a mana regen and then get out to use your abilities, get back in. Just make sure you're not there when it depletes, because then it's going to explode and deal a ton of damage, okay? So keep that in mind. The mutations are exactly the same on all the different expeditions. So whether you're doing Garden of Genesis or you're doing you know, the Ennead, or you're doing Glacial Tarn, you'll see that the mutations are exactly the same, regardless of which one you're doing. Now, the thing about Glacial Tarn is not only do you get the Frigid Dawn gear, and I'm going to show you what that is, but for light users right now, if you're to farm the M3 version, you're going to get the M3 style base perks with all those extra gem slots and skill charm slots or offensive defensive perks that you get from the M3, which are really strong. But the base perks with the Cold Hearted set, for light users, you get Shirking Fortification and Enchanted Ward. That's actually really good because you can stack Shirking Fortification. And if you look, all the light pieces except the boots will have the Shirking Fortification and Enchanted Ward. Okay? So, I mean, except the helm. So if you get these boots, though, you're going to get Enchanted Ward and Freedom. So you could stack Freedom, and that's on the medium kit. Right? So anything that's medium is going to have, instead of the Shirking Fortification, it's going to have Freedom. So you can stack your freedoms and be basically immune to stun and crowd control, especially if you use the artifact that goes with it. Okay? So the heavy stuff, like I said, it has Refreshing Enchanted Ward for the base stuff, but doing the mutated, you have a chance of dropping the Glacial Tarn set. So for example, we look at Glacial Tarn, I put some in here that I had laying around. So this used to be like our intermediate kit to get us into like Hive of Gorgons and things like that. But now that any gear that is 700 or above can be upgraded to 800, Frigid Dawn is kind of making a bit of a comeback right now, because it does still can retain those two base perks of Enchanted Ward and Elemental Aversion. Now, a lot of people would put health, or they would put refreshing into those pieces of gear, and if you put refreshing, then you kind of sacrifice getting the extra health. If you put in like a conditioning, then you kind of sacrifice getting the refreshing and the health. Well, now that season 10 comes, if you look, one of the base infixes is wellness, so it already increases your max health by 0.9. Well, that's at the 700. Okay, so if you get that all the way up to 800 gear score, it's actually going to increase your max health by more of a base value. So you're basically getting the quasi health increase that you would get from having to put that as a perk base. So you're getting max HP increase, and you're still getting Enchanted Ward and Elemental Aversion, and then you can choose another perk. So like, for example, these 2 pieces of gear, I have Slash Conditioning. So if I have a gem slot and Slash Conditioning, I can put in Onyxes, or I can put in, say I'd put, Strike Conditioning on here instead. I could actually put a Jasper in there, have Strike Conditioning and the Strike Absorption from the gem, maybe to help deal with Jester or things like that. So Frigid Dawn is still a really valuable kit. And the thing is if it's not 700 yet, if you go to your Gypsum Kiln and you have these items equipped or in your inventory, you can grab that piece of gear, put it in here, determine which perk you want. If you wanted Strike Conditioning, for example, your 2 base perks, it's still going to be Enchanted Ward, Elemental Aversion. You're still going to have Wellness. And then it's going to come out with a gem slot and Strike Conditioning. It'll be 700, and then you can use your Umbrals to upgrade it to 800. So to be honest, it's still a very viable set now that it can get to 800. The reason why it was more intermediate in the previous seasons is the max you could get it to was 700. So a lot of people were farming more of like the Hoplite set, because that would get to 725, and then they can get all their different attributes. Well, now that attributes aren't really tied to gear, it might be just for pure tanking in PvE. It could be considered one of the better sets for damage mitigation. Not so much for like, the skill charms and things like that. But if you have enough skill charms in, say, your shield or your weapons or your jewelry, then it still may be a viable kit. And we've been doing some testing, and I don't know. I think Frigid Dawn's going to make a big comeback this season. So just keep that in mind when it comes to farming that. As a tank, Glacial Tarn is one of like the best ones for you to farm, because the more materia you get, so say you don't get it dropped, you can come in here and you can actually craft the Frigid Dawn gear with the materia. So like in my other storage, I have a bunch of the materia. So like, say it didn't drop for me, I can come in here and I can go to the Frigid Dawn one, or I could just type in here Frigid, right? And I can craft the item using the materia, and then it's going to come out with, a random perk, and I could always change it to what I want. Or I could, if it comes out and it's got a great third perk, then I just use my Umbral Crystals, get it to 800, and I'm good. I don't have to use like a Armor Matrix and Chromatic Seals, okay? So that's how you use the Gypsum to get that gear upgraded to the perks you want. And yeah, if Frigid Dawn, when that's available for mutations as a tank, run that as much as you can, because like I said, it's a pretty viable set even in season 10. So I hope you got some value out of that video today. If you did, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. I do have all 3 of these mutations and expeditions in the Tank Mastery playlist, so you can watch those and get a full run through on how to tank them, how to do the pulls, how to deal with the bosses and stuff like that. Don't forget to hit up the Discord. We have a lot of tanks in there. We're always discussing builds and all kinds of stuff from not just New World, but other video games as well. And like I said, say hi to your mom for me, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you.